Thank you, Dean Cahill and the student organizers of the inaugural Brooklyn Sports Law Symposium. I am delighted to be here to have this conversation with Stan Wilcox, and a pleasure to reconnect with a BLS alum. A last-minute scheduling conflict required us to record this keynote conversation rather than conducting it live during the symposium, but I can assure you that it is unscripted and will be wide-ranging. We even solicited questions from the students to pose to our guests towards the end of the hour for some added spontaneity. So, welcome, Stan. Thank you for joining us today. And rather than start off by reading your biography, which is available online to our audience, I wanted to start with some questions that will give you a chance to tell your own story. And that story begins with your status as a local hero. You are a native of North Babylon, New York in Long Island. You are a Brooklyn Law School JD 1988 and a loyal alum, so loyal, we named you Alumnus of the Year for 2021. And you've had a storied career in college athletics as an athlete, as a conference representative, as an athletics department administrator and athletics director, on the NCAA staff, and now as a senior executive at the NCAA. I wanted to retrace that journey, in part to use it as a lens through which to examine the role and perceptions of the NCAA over time. So first, could we start with one stage of your career that I am particularly excited about? You were a basketball student athlete at Notre Dame, and you helped lead the Fighting Irish to the 1978 NCAA Men's Final Four appearance and 4 NCAA tournament berths. Tell me, from the perspective of the 1978 Stan Wilcox, what was your view of the NCAA, its role in your life as a college athlete, and the amateurism principle at that time?
Well, thank you, Jodi. Number one, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure coming back and speaking at my alma mater. I would start off by just saying it was a very interesting journey because the first, experience that I had with the NCAA was being recruited out of high school, being recruited by various different coaches from some of the top institutions in the country. And I had a coach, a 7th and 8th grade coach, who provided me with a book so I can read to kind of understand what recruiting was all about. Because, I wasn't, I was hoping that I would be able to play collegiate athletics, but you never know it until it really is upon you and it happens. And the recruiting experience was unbelievable. The number of letters that I started getting in my latter part of my junior year in high school, and then in my senior year, they were just coming like daily. And I had a whole box full of different letters, and I had to make a choice as to, you were only allowed to have 6 official visits, which basically means that you can go to visit an institution and they pay for your expenses to go visit. And during that visit, it's usually over a weekend, they kind of wine and dine you and talk about their program and make you become more interested in possibly signing with them. And at the end of the day, I had narrowed it down to Syracuse, Rutgers, and Notre Dame, and decided to go to Notre Dame as they were on television at least 8 or 9 times a year, national television, that is, and they had some great rivalry games. One of the biggest games back then which I would say is similar to the North Carolina Duke game these days, was the Notre Dame UCLA game. And being a part of those games every year was incredible. And I came in with a class of individuals who were, I call us the original Fab Five. It was Kelly Tripucka out of New Jersey, Tracy Jackson. He was out of Maryland, a guy by the name of Orlando Woolridge, who was out of Mansfield, Louisiana, and Gilbert Salinas, who was out of San Antonio, Texas, and myself. And we were the 5 freshmen that came in. And that first year is, it goes by like a blur, but we were, we knocked off some number 1 teams in the country. I believe it was Marquette at the time, that we beat. And they were ranked number one, and eventually we end up in the NCAA tournament. We're playing just like we played during the regular season, and we end up in the Final Four. Unfortunately, we ended up in fourth place, and back then they still had the consolation game, so we ended up losing the consolation game as well. So that's why we were in fourth place. But it was us, Notre Dame, Duke, Arkansas, and Kentucky, and Kentucky ended up winning that year. But we as freshmen, we thought we were so good, we were going to be back every year, and didn't realize how hard it is to get there. And to this day, we were the only Final Four basketball team in Notre Dame history. So that's, it just talks, it kind of indicates how tough it is to really get there. And we didn't realize it as young as we were. But those some really great years, really getting to realize, how playing at the highest level in the sport of basketball, you get an opportunity to basically go to all the top cities in the country, playing against the top teams in the country. And that's one of the reasons why I chose Notre Dame, because I wanted to play against the best and play with the best in the country. And that gave us that opportunity. And so
at that time, were college athletes at all thinking about the concept of pay for play, about exploiting their talents off campus, about using their celebrity to earn revenue for themselves? Was that part of the conversation at all back when you were on Notre Dame's team?
That was generally a part of the conversation during the recruiting process, because there are obviously NCAA rules that prohibit institutions from doing certain things to entice a prospect to come to their institution. So during my recruitment, there was an institution that offered me they offered to my brother a scholarship to go to school there. They offered my girlfriend a scholarship to go to school there. They offered my parents to buy them a home near the school, or if they didn't want to move and come down there, they would fly them to all the home games. So that goes on even today. But it was going on back then. And so there were those student athletes, prospective student athletes, who would take those kinds of offers. But I was one of those that, I wanted to abide by the rules. I didn't want to potentially find myself ineligible. The school that offered it, the coach and his staff were fired a year later. And I just can assume why they were fired. But the pay for play has always, I think, been a hit issue within college athletics. Ever since you had any great players that come out, the competition to get those individuals to come and participate at your institution is so fierce that there are those that are willing to break the rules and to pay prospects, pay their parents, pay their nowadays they call them handlers, or people that are the most influential in their lives, to help steer that individual to a particular school. So that piece of it, yes, it was there.
So I know that it was a dream of yours to potentially play professional sports. That didn't happen, but you kept your hand in sports right after college. Tell us a little bit about that and what led you to law school.
Sure. So after Notre Dame, I really, with an economics degree, I can't figure out what I want to do. I'm not willing to go back and get a master's and become a professor or teach. But I did continue to try to perhaps play professionally overseas, and I got offers to play overseas, but the amount of money was not worth it, and I felt that it was more important to get a career started. So I ended up working for an insurance brokerage firm that was owned by an individual by the name of Joe Monticello, and the other person was named Meade Esposito. Joe Monticello, his father was a former Supreme Court justice in Brooklyn, and Meade Esposito was a longtime Brooklyn borough president. And they took a liking to me, and Meade, encouraged me to apply for a position at the Brooklyn Supreme Court with the head administrative judge there at the time was named Justice Yoswine. And this was coming right out of a big uprising in the city because the downstate facilities were being overpopulated with individuals waiting to go to trial, and a federal judge released a number of lower crime individuals, and so there was an uproar in the community. So they created these new positions, which were called court analysts or senior court analysts, to help the administrative judges track all the oldest cases in the system on the criminal and civil side. So I got that job with Justice Yoswine, and while I was there, everybody was always encouraging me to go to law school. I may never have the opportunity again, and they were right. I was around judges, attorneys, all day long, court clerks, everybody that knew the law. So I ended up applying to Brooklyn Law, and fortunately, I was able to get admitted. And I guess it helped that I worked for the head administrative judge of the Brooklyn Supreme Court, and so that led me to law school. And I never thought that I would ever go to law school because I had no desire. If anything, I thought, well, maybe I might go back and get my MBA or something like that. But it turned out to be the best decision possible. And using my law school, the skills that you learn in law school were applicable basically anywhere. So coming out of law school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought about possibly becoming an agent, to continue with sports. And the people I talked to in that industry, I didn't like what I heard, how cutthroat it was and how, under the table, a lot of things were happening. So but then I ran into a friend who was on the women's basketball team at Notre Dame when I was on the men's basketball team. And she was working for the enforcement department at the NCAA at the time. And she mentioned to me, she said, there are a number of departments at the NCAA that hire individuals with legal backgrounds. And so she said, if you want to apply, just use my name, which I did. And I ended up interviewing in enforcement as well as a department called now it's called Academic and Membership Affairs. Back then it was called Legislative Services, basically the rules experts, and got hired in legislative services. And that way I was able to kind of use my background as a former student athlete with my legal experience and background, along with, actually I was a grad assistant coach for 1 year at CW Post College after graduating at Notre Dame. So I combined all those experiences and was able to get a job within collegiate athletics. And boy, did my eyes open even wider once I got to the NCAA and understanding and just not knowing all the administrative behind the scene things that go on to run college athletics. It was totally eye-opening, and one of the best, decisions I made as far as employment-wise, because it really gave me a bird's eye view of understanding how the association works, how the NCAA works as an organization, and I was able to be a part of a number of various different things through my first stint at the NCAA, which was from December of '89 through June or July of '94. So
you've had a number of different roles in college athletics, which I think gives you a unique perspective and perhaps an elevated ability to critique the organization First as a legislative assistant right out of law school, then as a Big East representative to the NCAA Management Council, and then in athletics administration at Notre Dame, at Duke, at Florida State, most recently as their AD. How did those experiences form your current perspective on the NCAA and its role?
Well, I would say that the one thing that I've never I always kept with me is the understanding kind of the collegiate athletics through the lens of a student athlete. So, as a former student athlete, and then getting into working for the NCAA, I was able to become the liaison to what they call as the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, and help that committee kind of grow so that the student athlete voice becomes more and more prominent within the NCAA, and student athletes have a greater role in the NCAA. And during that experience, I was able to help them understand the legislative process, where to look at various different bylaws where there may not be due process or things that are detrimental to student athletes. And that committee was able to eventually draft legislation, get it into the legislative process and get it approved. Things like just getting due process for if you want to transfer from one institution to another institution, you have to, if they deny a release for you to talk to another institution or to go to another institution, you have to give that student athlete some kind of hearing to tell that student athlete why you're denying it, and it has to be a hearing done by somebody outside of the athletics department. That was a huge thing for me, and that was the lens that I came into the NCAA and this whole collegiate athletics experience with, and I kept it with me. And even moving beyond the NCAA to the Big East Conference, they're creating student athlete advisory committee at the conference level, basically just expanding all the Big East regulatory affairs services, which include helping them understand and go through the enforcement process if they had a potential major violation on their campus, helping the Big East Conference understand how to actually propose legislation and how politically what you have to do in order to get the backing from the Division I membership to get those things adopted. Putting together the framework for the Big East Conference, because Big East Conference right back then was a microcosm of the NCAA or Division I would say, because of the fact that they had some schools in the conference that played football at the major level. They had at the FBS level. They had some schools that played football at the FCS level, and they had schools that did not have football, and they just played basketball, and that was the big sport for them. So it was about trying to really galvanize those schools around various different issues, national issues, to make changes in how the NCAA is run, how the NCAA does certain things as it relates to rules and regulations, et cetera. So the Big East was a great experience from the perspective of taking a finite number of schools and molding them and helping them come together to reach common goals and changes in legislation. And then moving on from there, going to a campus, that's a big difference because I knew that I understood the regulatory side of things about the NCAA and everything, but I didn't know really the operation side of things. So I knew the only way to really get that understanding is going to a campus, and I ended up going to work back at my alma mater, Notre Dame, for Kevin White, who was the AD at the time, who's from Amityville, Long Island.
You mentioned that he was the best mentor you've ever had. What made him so? What did you learn from him?
So Kevin had been at various different institutions. He was at Maine, he was at Tulane, Arizona State, before he ends up landing at Notre Dame. So he had a perspective about, what it takes to run an institution that's at the lower level of a Division I, and then one that's at the highest level of Division I. And so his perspective from understanding, number one, politically, how you need to, what things you need to do on a campus to get things done or accomplished within your athletics department on a campus. Because again, the athletics department is only one department within a larger university or a college setting, and you have to interface with the faculty, with the president, with the various different deans, etc., to get to support for what you need to do to move your athletics program further. You always create, when looking to create the best student athlete experience you possibly can create. You're looking to hire the best coaches you can, win conference and national championships. And that's kind of the success of an athletics department. But the major thing is making sure that, or trying to get to a point where your athletics department is self-sufficient financially. It's not looking to have any subsidy monies coming from the university. If anything, you are looking to generate enough money so that you can give money back to the university for scholarships, for regular students, etc.
So I understand that while under your leadership at Florida State, student athletes posted the highest GPA in FSU athletics history. So clearly it was more than what was happening on the field, that you prioritized academic success in a really spectacular way. Tell us how you made that happen.
So that's another one of my things as a student athlete I kept with me, because I understood as an athlete how difficult it is to and also as a minority student athlete, I know how difficult it is to go to a majority white institution and try to fit in and go into the classroom. And, even though you are an athlete, but everybody kind of knows that you're on national television. But anyway, it's still somewhat, it's difficult going into a classroom where you're with individuals who are all, the top of their high school class, valedictorians, and you're competing with them in the classroom. So, my motto always was, when I became an athletics director, my motto to my student athletes always was, understand that, you're gonna come here, play athletics at the highest level, but you're also going to get a degree, and you're not only are you going to get a degree, but you're going to go into that classroom and compete academically the same way you compete on the playing field. I need you to compete in the classroom just as hard, because the education is going to stay with you forever. At some point in time, you're not going to be able to continue participating physically in the sport that you so love, but you're going to take away from this university all that it has to offer from an academic perspective. And for me as an athlete, that really didn't click until probably my junior year, when I realized that, I'm no longer going to be a starter for Digger. I'm not going to probably be a top pick in the NBA draft or anything like that. And I was just trying to continue to stay eligible, as opposed to academically competing with the other students. And then Brooklyn Law School really brought it to light for me, because, in law school, everybody understands and knows that they have to compete, because they want to be in the top 5-10% of their class, because then they are able to get those top jobs on Wall Street or the top law firms, etc. And so, coming through Brooklyn Law and realizing that, I going into the library, and this is going to tell you how old I am, because I'm sure everything's probably computerized now. But researching a case, and you open the book and you find out those pages have been ripped out because somebody wants to try to get an edge on
That
somebody
never
else.
happened at Brooklyn Law School. That
Never happened. Not. But anyway, that to me drove home the real need for student athletes to understand how important it is that they compete in the classroom with the same kind of level that they exert on the playing field, whether that's a practice, competition, etc. You're fighting for a starting position, you're fighting to win the contest, etc. You want to do the same thing in the classroom. And so that was my motto, that was my message to the student athletes, and they took hold of that. They understood, they connect with me because they knew that I went through it, and they knew that I was a student athlete just like they were at one time.
So that's one way that your law degree served your career in college athletics. How else do you think your law degree contributed to your success as an athletic director at these top universities?
Well, it definitely helped because every year, practically every year, there was a certain number of coaches whose contracts would be running out. And so I would have to go into negotiation mode with keeping a coach, particularly if that coach is being very successful. And we had very successful coaches at Florida State during that time. And even before that, I was overseeing HR at Duke when I went to Duke, and so having a legal background was very helpful there because, again, I would be the point person with changing the coach's contract or telling the AD there exactly what's in the current contract, what needs to probably change. Looking at comparables of other institutions, coaches in that same sport and what they're doing, et cetera. So just really understanding kind of the contract negotiation part of that, things that you ought to have in contracts for coaches, and not just coaches' contracts, but then sponsorship deals, because we're always looking to generate additional revenue within the athletics department. And so we're looking at sponsorship deals. We're looking at multimedia rights deals, our radio rights, et cetera. And then we're looking for major apparel deals. And those contracts, every time they came up or came due, that was another opportunity to increase your revenue, increase the resources that you need to continue to drive a successful athletics department. So what I learned in contracts was always helpful. What I learned in was entertainment law back then. I'm not sure if it's still called that there now or what, or it's expanded, but all of those really helped me with my day-to-day operations within an athletics department, the conference.
Now, what I thought you were also going to refer to was the fact that athletics departments are heavily regulated entities, the NCAA being your regulator. And that one thing that you probably learned in law school and maybe was useful was how to read a statute, how to read regulations and understand them and comply with them. Was that part of your job, or was that delegated to others?
Yes. So once you become the head of an athletics department, you surround yourself with number one, individuals that, in my estimation, and other ADs athletic directors may not think this way, but I always was thinking that I want individuals surrounding me that have experience and background within the regulatory space, because if we ever had what I would call a major violation, I want all hands on deck. I want, I have the experience. I want my deputy ADs to have the experience. I want my head of my compliance department to have that experience, and obviously our Office of Legal Affairs. We had a person that was our liaison to athletics. I want that person to understand, have some understanding and background in NCAA rules and regulations. because that's when you really have to do the right thing and figure out what went wrong, why it went wrong. You got to fix it, and then you got to go through the process of determining what is going to be the outcome of what is going to be eventually the penalties. And that's part of my responsibilities, but you get to delegate a lot. So on a day-to-day basis, I wouldn't, compliance was not a part of day-to-day, but at least once a week, once every other week, I was always meeting with my compliance folks and trying to find out what's going on, what issues do they see that are coming up, and then dealing with any issues within the conference as far as conference rules, or then on a national level with the NCAA rules. It was their responsibility to keep me up to speed and up to date on what's going on. And if we needed to have a vote, whether it's at the conference level or at the national level, let's sit down. We got to talk through these proposals. We have to educate our president. I have to educate the president. And then we have to decide on how the university is going to, how it's going to vote on that particular issue. So yeah, that's a part of the responsibilities, but there's so many other things that you have to kind of keep your arms around, and sometimes a lot of that is holding some of your top coaches' hands, making sure that they're feeling good and that they're not looking to leave or go elsewhere, etc.
So October 2018 was something of a homecoming for you. You rejoined the NCAA as the executive vice president in charge of regulatory affairs. And, the job description is just about what we'd expect it to be. You're overseeing all the NCAA regulatory functions. But what do you really do on a daily basis? For example, what is on the top of your to-do list for the next week as NCAA EVP Regulatory Affairs?
So, on a day-to-day basis, it can be a variety of things, but mostly it's meetings. And I have to tell you, I don't really like meetings, but it's a necessary evil within college athletics. And so, as the EVP of Regulatory Affairs, I have to have meetings with my direct reports, who are the vice presidents for the enforcement department, the eligibility center, and then the academic and membership affairs. So we meet. I meet individually with them weekly. Every other week, and we meet as a group every other week. So on the off weeks, we're meeting face to face individually. On the other weeks, we're meeting as a group. And I have to have a good understanding of the major issues that are facing each of those particular areas. Right now, the biggest issue that I have on a day-to-day basis as one of the staff liaisons to what is called the Constitution Committee, I have to, on a daily basis, try to make sure that my direct reports understand and know what's going on with that group. And like tomorrow, I'm going to be part of the entire NCAA staff. We're having a kind of a town hall meeting in which we're going to talk about and bring them up to speed on what it means, what this new constitution means, what's going to happen as we move forward with that.
If I could just jump in, and for those of our audience who aren't aware, big news came out of the NCAA this week. The NCAA Constitution Committee, which was convened over the summer to restructure the governance of college sports, has issued a draft of a proposed new NCAA Constitution. So this is a huge development. Glad to hear that there's going to be this town hall for you and your staff tomorrow. What will you talk about in terms of the biggest takeaways from the draft Constitution that came out this week?
Well, the biggest takeaway, and this may be minor, but it takes a 43-page constitution and it gets it down to like 10 pages. It also takes the responsibilities and duties, a lot of them that were at the national level, and we're looking to push them down to whether it's the conference, divisional, or the institutional level. That also has something to do with the Alston case that we might get into a little bit later. But the more rules that you have at the national level that has some kind of financial impact, the more you're going to be vulnerable to litigation and the claim that antitrust claims. So the biggest takeaway is that this Constitution is giving more that responsibility down to the divisions, to the conferences, and to the institution. Then the other major thing is it kind of reaffirms some of the core issues and principles around collegiate athletics. It embraces for student athletes, number one, the need to have student athletes on basically all the various different committees, and particularly the major committees, have them there as having representation there, having a voice, and having a vote. That is, very, very important. It also embraces the fact that we still are not in the pay for play mode, but we do accept and embrace student athletes' ability to monetize off of their name, image, and likeness, as well as making sure the student athletes are still considered students of the university and are getting degrees or working towards getting degrees. It also it takes the highest governing board, which is called the Board of Governors, which is basically all presidents, and it takes it from 21 members down to 9 to hopefully be able to help make decision making more quickly. Right now, the way the whole NCAA is designed from a governance perspective, decisions take too long to occur, and I think one of the examples is the SDNY cases, the Southern District of New York federal cases that had to do with basketball, where outside individual was basically paying coaches to steer student athletes to certain institutions. But that was, a lot of you may that are listening may not even remember some of those cases that 3-4 years ago that we finally got an opportunity to start working on, because the federal government wanted us to wait until they finished their prosecution of those individuals. Then we were able to start, but we're still working on those cases. But the point is, the new Constitution is going to allow for quicker decision making, hopefully, and that will hopefully also help those, whether student athletes, coaches, administrators on campus, feel more comfortable and feel better about knowing that it's not going to take them forever to get an answer on various different issues. I would say the other big issue with this Constitution, what it does, it gives authority to the various different divisions to really chart their own courses. Division I is not going to be beholden to Division II. Division II is not going to be beholden to Division III, et cetera. And each of those divisions will be able to really design how they want to be structured from a governance perspective, how they want to do things, whether it's from a regulatory affairs perspective, and how they can kind of now manage their own revenues, and their expenses, and not have to kind of worry about what Division II or Division III may think about what Division I is doing, and what Division II is doing. Doesn't have to worry about what Division I and III. So it gives more autonomy to the various different divisions. And,
Is,
and, and I think that's a very good thing, and that's what the membership wants. But the devil is always in the detail, because the Constitution will be changed by January. Then after January, each of the divisions will have to, from January to August 1, because the new Constitution, its effective date will be August 1. So the divisions from January, when it's adopted, January 20th, until August 1, they now have to really look at the bylaws that all affect their division and kind of decide what bylaws we want to change, how we want to change them, and how that will affect basically their division. Now, they're not going to get it all done by August 1, but the major critical issues that they see that are critical issues within their division, those things they need to get done before the new Constitution takes effect by August 1.
So just so our listeners first understand the process for adopting this new Constitution. So we've got a draft. There's going to be a period of sort of notice and comment. I think I read that December 15th is a deadline for a revised version of this proposed Constitution to go to the Board of Governors?
Correct. So the Constitution Committee, its work is almost completed. Its work will be completed when it delivers to the Board of Governors the final product, or the final Constitution as amended based upon feedback that the committee will receive. There's no question they will receive feedback from the membership, which is over 1,000 institutions. Not that all 1,000 will give feedback, but there will be a lot of feedback. And the committee then has to really decipher all that feedback and determine where is there some coalescing around certain issues. And where you see that coalescing, then what is it about that we need to incorporate or modify within the draft of the Constitution? And so that'll be the Constitutions Committee's basically job from Monday, the special convention, and then January, and then till December 15th when they deliver their final product. So from November 15th after the special convention till December 15th, where is their due date to deliver their final product. And so during that period of time between November 15th and December 15th, that committee will be getting feedback from the membership. And
by the way, folks, if you're interested in taking a look at the draft Constitution, it's available on the NCAA website. Anybody could find it there. And then I understand there will be a special convention in January where it will be adopted or not. What do you think the prospects are for whatever gets delivered in January being adopted?
Well, I think it'll depend on how many comments and how many comments we get back after November 15th, after the special convention, and how this Constitution Committee, how it will be able to decipher and make amendments to make sure that these comments, particularly if there are a large number of comments that are saying some of the same things, how they are able to draft that into the draft document of the new Constitution. So from a political perspective, the Constitution Committee is comprised of kind of the leaders, the current leaders in each of the divisions, and basically the highest, what they called it in Division 2 and 3, their President's Council. So they're the leader or the chair of their President's Council is a part of Constitution Committee, and in Division 1, the chair of the Division 1 Board of Directors is a member of this committee, as well as at the highest level is the Board of Governors. The chair of the Board of Governors is a part of this committee. So one of the things that they're responsible for is making sure that their membership in their divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3, are comfortable and feel good about where this new constitution is. And if there are problems or issues, they have to make sure they identify those and bring it back to the committee. So politically, I think that the committee is going in the right direction to this day. I don't anticipate that there will be major issues that come up in the special convention on Monday. And if not, then the normal process is just making some amendments, making some changes based upon the comments and feedback that they're getting. And then so by the convention, the actual convention where everybody votes.
In January.
Yes, in January, January 20th. And that's one institution, one vote, one conference, one vote. I am pretty certain that by then everybody will be in lockstep and feel really good about the new constitution that will get adopted. And generally,
I was going to say, this constitution is really revolutionary when you think about it. I mean, just your observation that it's less than half the length means that alone means that the NCAA is stripping itself down to its essentials. It is streamlining its operations. It has, one of the things I thought was very interesting about the draft constitution is that it enumerates powers and duties of the NCAA and then specifically says that all of the unenumerated powers are to be presumed to be delegated down to the divisions and conferences. That the NCAA is now a limited government, sort of like the U.S. Constitution, or at least how perhaps it was originally designed, right? So this is going to be a streamlined organization. What happens to your role in that organization after the Constitution, assuming it's adopted, after it's adopted?
I retire and I live a happy life, and I say everything's done. And that's a question that my direct reports and we talk about all the time, and that is that we're certain that we know that in Division 2 and 3, many of the services are not going to really change very much. So they're always going to need regulatory affairs services. Even in Division 1, and the reason why I say this is because there are a limited number of schools at the highest level. I would say what some people characterize as the Autonomy 5 or the Power 5 conferences that their schools that generate the most money. When you look at the bottom quartile of Division 1, those schools don't make that kind of money. And therefore, they're still going to need, they're not going to be able to go out and hire the certain number of, whether it's compliance coordinators, whether it's Title IX administrators, they still don't have the monies for that. And they're still going to want to rely on services, these types of services, regulatory affairs services. And that's not the only thing that the NCAA has. Obviously, we run championships. We have a PR department. We have an Office of Legal Affairs. We have the finance department. We have a number of departments. But I guess I'm saying all that to say that there's still going to be a number of schools that need and want our services. And so I don't perceive regulatory affairs just going away, but I guess what I would say is that, and this is something that I kind of started when I came here, I do see that that the numbers that we may have in total in regulatory affairs will continue to go down. They're going down now because the membership is one thing that we know, or I know about my staff, and that is they know the most, they're the best in what they do. And that's because whenever there's an opening on a campus somewhere, and they mostly at the Power 5 level or Autonomy 5 level, whatever you want to call it, they recruit from my staff. We lose more staff to the membership than anywhere else. So I do see us reducing the numbers that we have, but I'll always see that there's going to be a need for whether it's academic membership affairs to be able to interpret their rules for them and give them interps, or they'll always be involved in probably having waivers of various different rules, because the facts just wasn't contemplated when they created a specific rule. I see the need for enforcement without question that the conferences are not going to want to do it. They're just not going to want to be viewed as the bad guy, I guess you put it that way.
I'm sure it's also more efficient and economical to have one office do this function than having multiple offices repetitively create duplicative functions for the regulatory environment. But that actually leads me to another question, which is, what does the substance, as opposed to the process of this regulatory environment, look like going forward? Can the divisions or even the conferences set different, maybe in some cases conflicting standards for athletic and academic eligibility?
So they can by division, but the division will determine what the academic eligibility will be. They'll determine whether or not that's going to be a divisional rule, or whether or not conferences can have different rules in that space, or if it's just going to be based on the institution and their admissions policies. But that has to be determined by each of the divisions. What's going to be the rule that's going to govern that whole division within that particular space. And the one thing about collegiate athletics, everybody's competitive. Every school is aspirational. They're looking to move up to a higher division. As you can see, what's going on right now with conference realignment, schools are changing and changing conferences left and right. And that started with just 2 schools leaving the Big 12, which was one of the Power 5 conferences, and going to another Power 5 conference, the SEC. That caused a whole trickle effect throughout the entire Division I membership. And so I guess what I'm raising, or what I'm saying, is that one of the things is that all our schools are very competitive. They understand what it takes to be successful. They also are not, they may be more trusting within their conference, but they're not very trusting of what maybe the schools in the other conferences are doing. So there's always going to be this need to figure out what rules that they want to have at the national level, at their divisional level, and maybe at the conference level. And that's going to be the next phase of this whole constitutional change. The next phase is, once the Constitution Committee and the membership adopts the new Constitution, the next phase is what I talked about earlier, and that is each of the divisions now have to look at their bylaws and figure out which ones do they want to get rid of, which ones do they want to keep, which ones do they want to modify, and all of that has to be done also under the lens of under a legal lens of making sure that what these rules are, they're not anti-competitive, that they don't put the organization, the conference, or the schools at risk of an antitrust violation or antitrust challenge. No one wants to be sued anymore.
This conversation and everything we've been discussing obviously is occurring under the shadow of the assault on NCAA amateurism through the Alston case, which resulted in that Supreme Court decision last June, and state level legislation that reinstated college athletes' rights to exploit their name, image, and likeness. So what is the NCAA's role going to be, if any, in the sort of aftermath of these two significant legal developments? For example, the upshot of the Alston case is that the NCAA must permit its member schools to offer recruited athletes all education-related benefits, any kind of benefit that is tethered to education. Who is going to be regulating that standard under the new Constitution?
Well, that'll be, again, up to the divisions, because they will be able to regulate the schools within their division on that issue. I don't see, or what I do see is probably the divisions not wanting to regulate too much in that area. They're going to, right now, basically any institution can provide any expenses needed for educational expenses. The issue is really interpreting what are considered educational expenses, because that can be widely interpreted. And so the divisions will have to decide and basically give an interpretation as to what that means. Is there a monetary value to it, or is there just making sure that there's some tie to those dollars that institution provides to, whether it's any student, any other student that may be in that similar circumstance as the student athlete, or vice versa. But anyway, that still has to be determined by the divisions. Not necessarily, hopefully not. They're not going to push it back up to the national level. That's, to us, is one of those more local issues that have to be decided at the local level. So I see that kind of occurring, but the second phase is the most important phase of this, and because this is where I said earlier, the devils are in the details, and that one I'm pushing one of my direct reports to be a part of being the staff liaison to that, what we call the transition committee in Division I. I'm good to sit on the sidelines and watch and provide my input where I think it might be needed, but that's where the real work is going to come.
Right.
The Constitution Committee met 9 times and was able to take 43 pages and down to 9, but the bylaws in Division I, geez, I don't know, 300 and some odd pages worth of bylaws. And now that doesn't all have to get done by August 1, but they need to really do a good chunk of that by August 1.
So I promised our audience that we would pop some questions that we collected from students to keep some spontaneity to this recorded conversation. So one question came up. There was a headline recently about congressional interest in proposing legislation to establish some uniformity across the country, right? Just at a moment where your organization, the NCAA, is trying to reserve legislative authority to the individual conferences and divisions and walk back some uniformity. Congress apparently wants to establish some uniformity with respect to college athlete exploitation of name, image, and likeness, to require some uniformity with respect to due process. What do you see coming out of those legislative proposals, and what is your role, or the NCAA's role, in lobbying Congress in that regard?
Yes, so we have an office in DC where our individuals that oversee our lobbying efforts work, and we have been lobbying and working with Congress, various different senators, congressmen, congresswomen, et cetera, to try to get some national legislation around name, image, and likeness, because the state, the various different states that have passed legislation in this area, they are not uniform, and that automatically creates for some in some schools in some states a recruiting opportunity or being able to get better recruits, because recruits may see that their laws are more lenient than another state's laws that's more restrictive, and that is what our membership has been actually pushing us to do, and we've been doing this for some time. Our problem has been that when you go to Congress to lobby for a bill, it kind of opens the door for all the other things that these senators, these members of Congress believe that should also be a part of the negotiation for a uniform bill in one particular area. So we've made some progress, but as you know, these days, Congress has been very busy with other more important things. But any time, particularly when a particular senator or congressperson wants some headlines, all they have to do is say that they're going to draft a bill that has something to do with the NCAA. That'll automatically get headlines. But I would tell you that we've been working probably the strongest with Congress Senator Gonzalez, who's a former football player, who really understands. Again, he sees it from a student athlete's perspective, understands how the association works, and he's been doing a pretty good job of moving forward or moving along a bill that he's kind of put together with assistance from us. The problem is that he's not going to be running for re-election, and so it's the likelihood of that bill getting introduced and getting adopted before his term is up is not likely. So we have to find another champion to kind of pick it up and keep running with it. But that is something that we do for the membership. Is we have a lobbying office in DC, along with other external lobbyists that help us with trying to get uniform bills, and particularly in the area of name, image, and likeness. Some of the other things that I know that some of the senators have been talking about are things that our membership are not interested in really doing. They really want a bill just focused really on name, image, and likeness at this point in time. But again, the worst case scenario, I don't want to say it's the worst case scenario, but the way things could go, I can see Congress maybe taking over some area of whether it's collegiate athletics, whether it's, has, not that we don't do a good job, because we do a great job and people just don't know it, in the areas of safety and health and safety, mental health issues with our student athletes. The problem always is not being able to have a rule that crosses all divisions, all schools, because of the fact that we have schools that their athletic budgets are so diverse that you can't say that you have to have a mental health specialist on your staff. Some can't afford that, but they have to understand that they to be a member of the association, that principle of making sure that your student athletes are looked after from a mental safety, mental health issue perspective has to be paramount within their athletics department and how they treat student athletes.
So we're going to close with one final question from one of our students, which I think is particularly relevant as the Brooklyn Law School Alumnus of the Year for this 2021 year. And the question is, how impactful has the BLS alumni community been for your career? How much have you relied on it and built on it?
Well, I always tell everybody that the things that I learned, what I learned in law school, have helped me throughout my career. From Professor Crea saying, "Never drop your suitcase and run," that type of attitude, meaning that you've got legal expertise. You can talk with the best of them. You can figure out what the issue is. You can do it. You can figure it out. So never drop your briefcase and run. From that to just being able to sharpen things that I kind of understood and knew as a student athlete that were maybe not totally right, that I felt within collegiate athletics. Brooklyn Law School helped me sharpen my understanding of what it is, why it is, and how to go about making changes, positive changes for student athletes and for the association as a whole. And so I on a daily basis, I rely on the skills that I learned from Brooklyn Law School, not just within the classroom, but from the professors with the various one-on-one meetings that I've had with them, and I'm always grateful for that. And that's why I also feel it's very important to always give back, because what Brooklyn Law School gave me is with me for a lifetime, and I owe it to the law school from what it's provided to me to always give back whenever I can.
Well, we certainly appreciate you giving back today and participating in this symposium. Kudos to the students for organizing a great day. I hope everybody enjoys the upcoming panels, and we'll see you on Zoom. Take care. Thank you so much, Stan.
Thank you, Jodi. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.